Ever have a boss where you just didn't get along with them and there was just no way that you two were going to get along? What did you do? Did you stay or did you go? I'm going to give you some tips on how to manage this sort of situation by looking through the lens of two cases that have just happened in the last month in Australian companies where the CEO or an exec has left the company or been dismissed because they didn't get along with the CEO. And I've been in that scenario, you probably have as well. We all got to think about how do we make that work and when is the time when it just can't. If we haven't met, my name's David, I'm a CFO. Let's talk about this first case and start seeing what sort of interactions have happened here. So the case is Sherry Duhe. I'm not sure if that's pronounced correctly, but she was the CFO. She'd been at Santos, which is a very well-known Australian company, and had come through over a year ago from another well-known similar industry in the mining industry. And she'd been in the job for a year. And at some stage, she's gone to the board and basically said, it's the CEO or me. Now, that is a ballsy move because one, she's only been there for a year. Two, the CEO had been there for something like 9 years. And it's really just a personality clash between the two of them by the sounds of it. And the leadership style of the CEO was not going to be able to reconcile herself to. So she's gone to the board and made her complaint. And the comment here is when she actually sounded like she went to the CEO and tried to resign, and then he tried to keep her on, in which case she said that he would have to change his leadership style for her to stay. Now, if I'm thinking about all the exec leaders that I've ever worked for, they don't change their leadership style. You go in knowing who you are working for, and in this case, she went to work for someone who had been there for at least 8 years and their style was exactly known by anyone in the industry. So to go in there and then not be able to get along with it and then suggest that he needed a change was going to be a very tough situation and not one likely that she was going to win. So then it sounds like the chair of the board has then told her that she was no longer needed. And then from there, it sounds like there's an even messier ending in relation to whether there was non-disclosure agreements that she was willing or not willing to sign, and just how that played out in terms of how they made a market announcement and tried to gloss over it as well. So bad situation. And this one really, I think the lesson is that in some cases you will work with a executive or a CEO where you do not get along with them and you need to decide whether or not you can stay. Because it's not a case of that they are going to change or that necessarily trying to force them to is going to do anything else but actually make that division even worse. And I think from my scenario, when I've worked with at least one person I can think of where I just didn't get along with them, and many of the other executive had also got to that point as well. So at some stage, there'd been probably 3 executives that had already left just because they just didn't get along with this person. And his style was not something that was going to mesh, or for the fact that people that had been there for many years had just had enough and just could not see a way forward. So I think when people see the writing on the wall, sometimes it's best to look out for yourself and make a smart move for yourself rather than to think, well, I'll just keep trying, I'll just keep seeing my way through it, I'll try to change and adapt. That probably is not the way to go. If you're strong in your conviction and you think you've got a position where you are doing all the things in the right way of how you expect it should happen, and you're not seeing that the company you're at is going to support that, then you're probably best to reconsider where you're working with. And the next case is Webjet, another Australian company, ASX listed, and it was actually from the chief legal counsel who basically suggested that the chief executive had been lying on parts of their resume and that they'd been dismissed unfairly after they tried to raise those concerns to the board. So this is a really unusual case, and the case of Megan Simpson, who had raised those concerns, and then when those concerns weren't acted on, she alleges that she'd been excluded from work and essentially bullied. And at that point then she was actually dismissed from her role. And this is a really bizarre one because I think in both of these cases I've raised, I think we're going to take the assumption that the person that left was actually a highly competent and qualified person to do these jobs. There's nothing to say that it wasn't the case whatsoever. But where they've then gone ahead and gone head to head with the CEO, it just hasn't ended well. Because at the end of the day, the board is going to back the CEO unless they have absolute clarity around why they wouldn't. And if you're an executive and you have some sort of issue, regardless of what it is, if you don't at least acknowledge that as the starting position, if you don't have strong enough evidence of what you're suggesting, then you are making life very difficult for yourself in trying to go against the CEO without something of substance. And in some cases here, some of the things that were being alleged about the CEO claiming they'd been working in the industry for a certain number of years, where that might have been exaggerating by a couple of years. They potentially were allegedly exaggerating the directorship that they had. I think in these cases, while there might be a point to what the legal counsel had, there's also the other side of it that you could technically look at what was being claimed and said, well, it's not actually an outright lie. There's a sense here of it's been sort of just twisted or manipulated to an extent, but it's not enough for you to go up head to head and jeopardize your job over. Unless there's something of substance where really this was a case where the legal counsel just could not get along with the chief executive, or their position was somewhat untenable, and this was kind of like a last-ditch effort to try to bring that to a head, then I think bringing it up as a case otherwise, like it has resulted in, they were then dismissed. So they haven't been backed by the chair or the company, and it really hasn't ended well in this case either. So the lesson we can really consider here is when you're in a position in a senior finance role and you're an employee, you have a lot of extra provisions and entitlements and protections to your job. But if you're aiming to get promoted and you're aiming to move into these executive roles like CFO, then you do have to understand that you are also putting yourself in a position where you no longer have these protections. And if the CEO doesn't like you, you can be out. If the chair doesn't like you, you can be out. If the board wants you out, you're out. And going up against the CEO in a case where you don't have a rock solid case, then you are in all sorts of trouble. And you do have to be somewhat realistic about that, because you're either going to try to make a situation work, or you need to think, well, if this is not the best for my career, I probably need to move on and find a scenario which meshes with me in a more coherent manner. But that's the risks then you have if you're then in that CFO role. You might be on a fixed contract. You might be on a basis where the performance metrics can be used to remove you if they're not met. And even if a new CEO came in, if they want to then hire their own CFO, you're out then as well. So you do have more risk in these sort of roles. You are at jeopardy if you're not performing, and if you're also not able to work very, very cohesively with the CEO and the board. That's just ultimately so critical. And if you find this fascinating, go up and read the scenario around Super Retail Group and the CEO that ultimately got sacked, but a year and a half before was also accused by several senior staff. The board backed him to the hilt until over a year later it was found that he was lying to the board. So if you think that doesn't happen, you're wrong. Super Retail Group is a case study in a disastrous way that the board acted in that scenario. Let me know your thoughts on the CEO and CFO type clashes and what you would do down in the comments below. And subscribe to the channel. I'd appreciate it if you want to see more content designed for senior finance and accounting staff and things that can help move you forward in your career. I've got tons more videos like this one up here that I know you're going to want to check out, and I'll see you on my next video. Bye.